Welcome to this video. In this video, we will practice using pandas using a dataset. So far in the previous examples, we have constructed the data frame and also the series manually, just typing in the values in the notebook. Many often, and in real-life applications, the data is coming from a data source. In this exercise, we're going to load the data from a CSV file, kind of like a spreadsheet file. So in the data folder, you have a file called gapminder.tsv, which stands for tab separated values. Indeed, you can open up this file in Excel, and Excel will recognize it as a spreadsheet file. Similarly, in pandas, we can use a function called readCSV, and we can pass in the CSV file. Now, a CSV file stands for comma separated value file, and those values are separated by commas. In a TSV file, the values are separated by a tab character, hence I specified my separator to be a tab. The next function is called head. This function shows the 5 entries in the data. This is a very useful function because many often we don't want to dump the whole data in the notebook. We just want to get a feel of what the data looks like. So the function head just shows the 5 first entries. Okay, so let's run this cell. I'm going to read the file and show the 5 entries in this file. Now, this file, this data set, is basically country demographics over time. We have information about multiple countries, including the country name, the continent name, the year in which the observations have been recorded, and the observations themselves are the life expectancy or the average life expectancy in this country in this year, population, number of people in this country in this year, as well as the GDP per capita. Let's look at the questions. First, how many rows and columns does the data contain? So we need to access the size of the data frame. There are multiple ways of getting to this answer. Because we're being asked to report the number of rows and columns, we can basically use the shape attribute. And the shape attribute will give us the number of rows, in this case 1704 rows and 6 columns, as we can see here. So we can load them in the 2 variable rows and columns. If we're being asked specifically to report rows and columns. Another way to get to the same answer is to look at the index and count the number of entries in the index, both the rows index and the column index. So I can do the length of the row index, and that will give me the number of rows, as well as the length of the columns index, and this will give me the number of columns in the data. This question is asking me to select one column from the data set, which is the column country. Once again, we can think about the data frame as a bunch of series stacked together. So we can think about this data frame as the series of country, continent, year, life expectancy, population, and GDP per capita. The way to get a series as a column, we can do data and then the name of the series, the name of the column, and this will basically give me the series here. Now, as you can see here, pandas doesn't dump all of the data in the series in the notebook. It basically gives us a compact representation. So it figures out that we don't probably want to dump all of the values in the notebook, hence the ... and it shows the first 5 and the last 5 values. So this is a very useful feature because many often if we dump large data in the notebook will become very crowded and many often very large for the notebook server to handle. Many often when we operating on data, we probably want to write the data to a file once we're done processing it. So what I usually do, I load these parts of the data in variables. So I can call this variable country series in this example here. And then country series, I probably use head to get the first few entries just to see what's inside it. The next question is asking us to select country and continent. So obviously one way to do it is to put data country here, and we can do data continent as well. this question is asking us to do both. So to do both, we can think about selecting a series from the data frame and extend this operation to select a list of series from the data frame. So instead of typing here either country or continent, what I'm going to type in here, I'm going to type in country and continent. So I'm selecting a bunch of columns, country and continent, from the data frame. We will talk more about this selection operation in the next lecture. For the purpose of this lecture, you can think about this as extending this operation. This is picking one column and this is picking multiple columns, and hence I put them in a list. And as you can see here, we've got another data frame. We did not get a series because we're selecting multiple series, hence we get a data frame. And this data frame has the same number of rows, but obviously it has 2 columns since we selected the 2 columns from the data frame. Once again, it makes sense to store this in a variable because often we want to process this data. We just don't want to show it in the notebook. And just take a look at the head. All right, on to number 5 and 6. It's asking us to select the first row and then select the first 5 rows. This is an important operation because many often we want to select based on the rows as well as based on the columns. In number 3 and 4, we selected a column or bunch of columns. In number 5 and 6, we want to select rows, 1 row and 5 rows. So the first row is this one. The 5 rows are these ones. So you've probably figured out number 6, right? It's the first 5 rows that we can get by calling the function head. So the function head is going to give me by default the first 5 rows. What if I want the first row only? So there are multiple ways to get to the answer, and in the next lecture we will talk more about data indexing and selection in more details. For the purpose of this exercise, we can use the function head. Now the function head takes an optional parameter, which is the number of rows. Sorry, I meant to pull the documentation, which is the number of rows that it takes. By default, the value is set to be 5, but we can provide another value, number of rows to select. So I'm going to select only 1 row here, and oops, not 2, only 1, and that will give me only 1 row from the data. So again, this is very handy if I want to select first 1, first 2, first 5. I can use the function head. Now I'm going just to give you one bonus information. If I want to select the last 5 or the last 1 or the last n, there is another function called tail, which, as the name implies, give me the tail of the data frame.